When is the last time that you celebrated a breakup? I know it sounds kind of funny, right? Because we're living in an imperialist paradigm, and the programming we receive is to understand successful relationships, quote unquote, as ones that last forever, particularly the sexual romantic ones. And this incentivizes us to force misalignments in order to strive for this imperialist definition of relationship success. And what happens when we force misalignments creates friction, creates suffering. And on the extreme side, it could even incentivize us to stay in an abusive relationship much longer than we need to, or really just any relationship longer than we need to. My guest today, that was not their circumstance. It wasn't that extreme. But I'm just so inspired by their journey, and I'm excited to have them on to share their experience with you. There is so much abundance in accepting misalignments, particularly when there is emotional chemistry, romantic chemistry, and especially sexual chemistry. Because at least for me, I can really get hooked on sexual chemistry. And then, I don't know, it's like logic goes out the window. And definitely in my history, I have definitely stayed way too long in relationships that just were not working. They weren't hitting the spot for me, and I was kind of suffering. I was sacrificing my desires or my needs in order to cling to the fantasy of what I wanted the relationship to be, or what I could see the potential of the relationship could develop into. But in the meanwhile, as long as I was in this scarcity paradigm of forcing the misalignments, trying to force them into alignment, it just wasn't going to work. I was going against the flow, and I was resisting what was. I was living in the fantasy more than reality. And in doing so, I was really holding on tight to this idea of I can make this relationship work. And in the process, I was leaking so much energy, all the energy that could have been going to just things that bring me life, things that inspire me, that fuel me, that ignite my spirit. And so there's so much abundance to just accept, like, hey, I love you and we have beautiful chemistry, and this just isn't aligned in the ways that I'm needing it. So I'm going to let go of this very compassionately and lovingly, because I have faith in the future that if I let go of the misalignments, I'm creating space for the things that are aligned. And when we're living in alignment and we're trusting in the flow of the universe, we are inviting in ease. And of course, not to say there's not grief in the process. To love is to grieve. To grieve is to love, you know? So part of acceptance and letting go is not resisting the grief. Oftentimes, the grief might feel too painful, and we're like, no, I don't want to accept this relationship is not working. And so I don't want to grieve its ending. I'm just going to cling on as tight as I can and kind of suffer in the process. Just kind of spinning your wheels, you're not getting what you want, and in the meanwhile, you're blocking the ease from actually flowing into your life. So it takes so much courage and so much clarity, really. It takes a deep relationship with oneself to be honest with oneself. Am I living in a fantasy, or can I accept that maybe this relationship isn't aligned enough for me to continue moving forward? There's so much more to be said on this. I actually wrote an article about this. I will link it in the description of this podcast episode. I do read half of it during the episode with my guest, Melissa. They will introduce themselves shortly. So if you're interested in going deeper, it's pretty rich and concise and just dripping in abundance. So, yeah, may this paradigm shift inspire you, and may Melissa's story inspire you. Enjoy. Welcome to the Abundant Futures Podcast, where we aid the collective transition from scarcity to abundance by divesting from imperialist relationship norms. I'm your host, Forrest, queer witch, certified relationship coach, and disciple of love. May you be filled with hope by expanding your awareness and understanding the actionable steps you can take today for a better tomorrow. May you feel inspired by the real-world examples of what's possible outside of capitalist imperialism. May this be in service of collective liberation. And so it is. Melissa, welcome to Abundant Futures Podcast. I am so excited to have you on for many reasons. Maybe I'll go ahead and say the reasons, and then you can introduce yourself.
Get out the scroll. No, I'm kidding.
Actually, I have a literal document over here, so I think we've talked about this, but definitely you have been you planted a seed in me around hosting a podcast. So it just feels like really full circle that I'm here hosting a podcast, and then I'm having you on as a guest. It's just so delightful.
What else do you want?
Yeah, who's coaching who now? Let's see. Maybe I'll go ahead and say too, how we met and how long we've known each other, and then we'll have you introduce yourself. So, Melissa and I have been working together for almost 3 years. We're just a few months shy from the 3-year mark, which is pretty amazing. Normally when people work with me, well, I'll say this. This is the only person I've ever worked with so consistently for such a long amount of time. And for me, it's been a fucking delight. Because to witness how committed you are to this process and to growth and to collective liberation, particularly, because it would be different if it wasn't in the context of a greater social justice kind of vibe, It's yeah, I'm just a growth junkie. It's I like to hoard wealth. No, for you, it's right. Yeah. So it's just been so delightful for me to have this relationship that we've pretty much developed, having these weekly calls for almost 3 years in a row, and just to see the ways that you grow and change and really transform, moving closer and closer towards your values and moving through fears. And it's just been beautiful. So maybe I'll leave it there for now. And then however you would like to introduce yourself, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. And I don't think it had quite clicked in my head, the name of your podcast, that it's Abundant Futures. Yes, that's what this work has been all about with you. So my name's Melissa. My burlesque name is Vixen Riot. I think they're currently my only names, or Foxy when I work in TV and festivals. I am 47, turning 48 this year, and I live in Meanjin, Brisbane, in Australia, on the unceded lands of the Turrbal and the Yuggera people. And it is important to me to start our session by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land, and their elders past, present and future. And it's a really important part of my work to be led by and walk alongside Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, particularly LGBTI brother, boy and sister girls, for our collective liberation, but in particular to acknowledge the harms that have been done by them through colonialisation and continue to be done. I am queer. My pronouns are they, them. I identify as genderqueer. I have 2 daughters, 16 and 19, and I work now in the community services sector, supporting organisations to enable and empower their participants to help shape services and transform systems. And I perform burlesque, and I've also recently started doing sex work. And all of that really aligns with my volunteer work in LGBTIQ plus spaces. I'm currently president of the Queensland Council for LGBTI Health. Yeah, and very much through my journey around polyamory and relationship anarchy, solo polyamory, was really drawn to working with you to transform my attachment patterns and the harmony and what's the word, joyfulness of my relationships, all my relationships as a parent, as a leader, as a partner.
Oof. That's a hell of an introduction.
It's busy being me.
Yeah, I really respect just all the projects that you're involved in. There's a lot of diversity and a lot of just different skill set required. I have deep respect. To be honest with you, when you first reached out and I was reading your intake form, I was like a little bit intimidated. I was like, oh my God, this person sounds like really cool. You're like doing all this really meaningful activist work. And I was like, okay, let's do it.
Well, it's so interesting that you say that, because I feel like you've been the guide to, what's the word, maximize the impact that I can have in the world. That's, yeah, I want to be I want to use the privilege that I have, the qualities, the passion that I have to truly have an impact while I'm here, and that involves, all that stuff that you talked about looking at my patterns, overcoming my fears, and creating community. Oh, the other thing as well that I'm sure there's other things I forgot to mention. I'm sober. That's been part of this journey. And I am really passionate about creating spaces for queer and particularly trans and non-binary folk to have safe spaces to build kink communities and experience the liberation and fun of kink and BDSM.
Beautiful. If I lived in Australia, I would definitely be at those spaces. Oh goodness. I already feel like there's a million directions I want to go into, but I'm telling myself to focus. So I know. Maybe let's just start simply. If you don't mind sharing just how you got into solo polyamory or relationship anarchy as a framework. I don't recall. Well, I don't remember if that was like your intention when we first started working together. It felt like at the very least there was an evolution that happened where you really started feeling passionate about that.
Yeah. So I think I'm just thinking back to the time frame. So August 21 was when we started working together, and I'd had a pretty challenging 18 months to 2 years before that in my polyamory journey, and involving the pandemic, which was not a great time, to be an extrovert person that loved performing and I was involved in lots of health advocacy and being in the world and influencing change, and then then at the centre of the response here in Queensland and doing it from my office at home, and yeah, it was really stressful. And my partner at the time had just found a new partner, and I wasn't dating anyone, and that was really tricky during the pandemic. So I think I had tried to do that, I guess, mostly on my own during that time, and just knew I really needed some support. And it really was through unpacking, mononormativity and some, not great dynamics, some enmeshment, insecurities, all those kinds of things, that I think naturally I moved towards solo polyamory. About a year later, it was like a natural journey, and I think that a lot of that was through the work with you. And thanks to TikTok that I found you.
Yeah, we'll see how long it lasts in the US at least. Oh, I love that. I kind of want to read the thing I wrote. I might be jumping ahead of myself. Well, maybe I'll say this. When you first reached out, you were in part of your cycle that we've both identified together, that there's ebbs and flows. There's like flowing and you're feeling hopeful, like life is good and there's so many possibilities for dating and romance, and especially in the framework of solo polyamory or relationship anarchy, because we know that's way less mainstream. So there are real like societal environmental limitations there. So and then the flip side of that cycle is dipping into that feeling of hopelessness and maybe like despair could be kind of an intense word, but just like the flip side of the when you're feeling up and you're feeling full of possibilities, it's just like the oh damn, actually I don't know about this.
Yeah, scarcity versus abundance.
Yeah. 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 Um uh, I don't know where to go. Like we could deepen in on these cycles of hope and hopelessness. Yeah, actually, maybe let's go there first, and then I want to read this little snippet that I wrote. Um, yeah. So, how would you describe these cycles? That I mean, you've been studying them for a while. We've been studying them together. Your cycles now for like almost 3 years. So, um, through your observations, what is like predictable in the cycles of hope and then hopelessness?
God, this feels like one of our sessions. At the end, just like, and next week, come back and share what you've reflected on this. Would you like to? It's always with open consent. Yes, I would. Give me the hard stuff. Yeah, so what is predictable? I still kind of feel like a little bit like a goldfish brain. I still haven't quite hooked onto the, oh, it's predictable and, oh, this is what happens. I think
Yeah.
I'm still getting that. And maybe that's because I don't sort of have that observer mind yet. But when I think about that question, yeah, it is definitely that experience of living in a city where, yes, there's a queer polyamory community, but it's not huge. You know a lot of the folk already. Um, yeah, it can, like, scarcity is kind of a reality. I'm that's where I'm at the moment, of a kind of a place of acceptance around that. And at the same time, the pieces that I know I have learned bring me back to that place of a greater satisfaction with my life. Still being on the path of relationship anarchy and solo polyamory. I really know to bring my focus back to myself and, okay, how am I taking care of my own stability, like your stability wheel? I still use as a compass and a touch point to come back to. What do you mean it started with morning stretches and that transformed? It's witchcraft. But yeah, that how I feel good about myself and then have higher standards of what I'll accept into my life is that really comes from that place of self-care and making good choices for myself. And also structuring my life in a way that there are abundant sources of love, physical touch, whether or not that's sexual or platonic, those buzzy sources of the good hormones from dancing, community building, doing things for other people. All of that is in my control when I'm in those cycles of hopelessness and scarcity mindset. And thirdly, compassion for myself that, actually we're not, meant to be these individual, isolated beings that are meant to be okay with being, on our own. And that's such a capitalist, stance on things. It's like it is valid to want connection and partnership and pleasure. Yeah,
Mm.
and being kind on myself and making space to grieve and just really feel
Mm.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That's like a little time capsule for me. I feel
Yeah.
like you've grown so much in that realm. Like, I almost forgot that we had even like crossed that bridge together. Because I remember, I mean, this is like 3 years ago, so it's a while ago, but um, there would often be just, you were like asking me for like validation almost. It's like, is it okay to have these desires? And just a lot of like the bringing that compassion and like validating yourself. It's okay to like want love. That's like totally normal. It's a human thing. It's how we're designed.
Yeah, and it's okay to have standards of like how you want to be treated. It's okay to want
Yeah.
consistent communication and availability. I think,
Yeah.
when you're socialized as a woman, yeah, you're told so often that you're expecting too much. And
Yeah.
no.
Oh goodness. Yeah. um I was about to give another example about ways that people socialize as women. Just it feels like too negative though. I don't want to go there because I could talk for hours about patriarchy. So like, let's just not right now. Yeah, there are definitely barriers for people who are socialized women when it comes to just validating ourselves. That's for sure. And definitely, like as time has progressed and you've been moving through these cycles with a lot of courage. We may have talked about this before, but from my perspective, it takes so much courage to have hope. Because it requires heart. It just does. And, sometimes we are too hurt to open our hearts to the possibility of hope. So it just feels safer to keep ourselves closed and protect our wounds.
Yeah, I'm very much still in that at the moment. 6 weeks post like 2 breakups. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, when you put it that way.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
Well, this kind of brings it back to the cycles, like I'm kind of laughing a little bit because I know like one of like maybe like a breakthrough session we had was this epiphany around, oh shit, it's a pattern. It's going to continue happening. Even if I'm like, like tending to it, it's still going to repeat.
How rude. Thought I was cured. Thought I had the graduation certificate. Rude.
Right. Not that you're like stuck in them for life, but what I find often in this type of work where we're just like observing patterns and playing with patterns, often there's this sense of like alleviation when you just become aware of a pattern. You're like, oh, thank God, now I can see it and I'll look out for it and I'll never do it again. But in reality, it's like, well, I mean, this has been a pattern for how many years? Like, it's gonna keep happening. It's like this automatic thing that continues happening. So the practice is to observe when it's happening, because that creates the choice point to shake things up a little bit. And over the years, I've really seen you shake things up to where we're having completely different conversations around maybe similar themes, like when the hopelessness comes.
Yeah.
And from my observations, you've been able to come out of those dips a lot quicker than you have historically.
Cool. And I think that's one of the things that I so appreciate from you on a week to week basis. But then those opportunities where, you get to zoom out and you're a mirror to me. Yeah, that celebration, validation, identifying patterns and growth. Like I find it a lot harder to do that on my own, in my own journaling. And that's one of the things that I'm so grateful to you for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's motivating to keep doing the work and do the work between our sessions. And where can I take this? Yeah. The downfall of capitalism? No. I mean, yes.
But yes, yeah. Yeah. For me, it feels really special to be in the intimacy of celebrating one another, just because it's totally not a norm within the empire. The empire is like, let's only focus on what's not going well. And then if things are going well, let's just call that normal or something, you know?
Yeah. And on to the next thing that we've got to fix. Yeah.
Right, right. So it takes a lot of patience, a lot of compassion, a lot of love just to like slow down and celebrate. And at least for me, it feels really intimate because I don't know, maybe it's not something I could do with just anybody. It's like show my insides to someone and they'll be like, wow, well done. You know, like it's kind of intimate.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, I've got something for you. I've got a question. Are you ready? And I'm like, give it to me. You know, like to like really take it as far as we can take it. I love having the courage and yeah, and that you love that too. And that you like I feel a trust of like, yeah, I can handle this hard stuff. Like, you know, for as things I can do it. You know.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
We've
yeah.
definitely built up the rapport.
Yeah, and it's much nicer than I saw a TikTok yesterday that I have been drawing on. You know, all tools are helpful, but it was saying if you're having trouble being motivated to do something, imagine that your enemies or haters like don't want you to. So, like, that's been great, but you know, in general, I don't really want spite as my motivation. I prefer, you know, the motivations that we draw on.
Yeah,
Like
from
the
a place of
downfall
abundance.
capitalism. Oh yeah, and that too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and from like an energetic, like quantum physics level, when we are indulging in that energy of celebration, which is really just validating yourself, but then with the added bonus of like, I can be a witness for you too, and like sprinkle in some of my validation, not from a place of like, I'm grading you or you're going to be punished if it's wrong, but it's just like, wow, I see you and I'm really inspired by what you're doing, you know, like so much abundance in that being a fuel for motivation.
Yeah.
And when we're tapping into that energy, that in itself, it's like the energy of life. That is the thing that's going to keep fueling the tank, especially when you hit those rocks in the road and you dip into the hopelessness after 2 breakups in a row. You know, like that's just life.
Yeah, and I know there's wisdom in there as well. Like that's what I've learned, you know, through removing what doesn't serve me. Like there is wisdom in the wanting to crawl under a rock and not date again. Like you know,
Yeah.
there are kernels of wisdom, and yeah, that resonates for my journey around sobriety, like removing alcohol, you know, so that I could be the best, you know, leader and parent and partner. And yeah, I think it's just constantly removing what doesn't serve me and being courageous
Mm-hmm.
to do what does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really, the Serenity Prayer, I think, really encapsulates that. Yeah, so
Would you mind saying it for people who don't know
yeah,
it?
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And the context is, I think I'm allowed, I always get a bit confused about the rules of anonymity, but I grew up uh, with a close family member in AA, and so I grew up with like AA and Al-Anon and Alateen as the family religion, I say, and so I still draw on the principles and steps and everything. But yeah, the Serenity Prayer is God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think that really encapsulates a lot of what we've done together.
I love that prayer. It's so deeply resonant and so like simple and concise.
Yeah, 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 liberating. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, so there's like so many layers that we can add into this theme of like the cycles of hope and hopelessness. But I'm feeling like actually I do want to read this little snippet that I wrote like a little over a year ago, if you don't mind. And then maybe we could circle back to the layers because it's all the same theme. So it'll just be a different angle. You open to that?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay. Yes, please. Love that. Okay. So this happened a little over a year ago that wait, was it 2 years? Who knows? It's been a while since I wrote this and actually never published it. I had the intention to, but this happens often in my workflow where I just like don't publish things, but I write them. But anyways, it was after a session that Melissa and I had gotten off of, and I was just beaming. Like I could feel every cell in my body just like dancing. I felt so inspired by your journey, Melissa, because I've seen you through the ups and the downs and, you know, as the cycles repeat in the ways that you show up differently. And this was like such a breakthrough moment that I just wrote about it. So you're just going to have to bask in the witnessing me celebrating you as I read this thing I wrote a little over a year ago.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So it starts like this. Have you ever celebrated a breakup? I don't mean the kind where you shit talk the other person, like, oh, that asshole doesn't deserve me, good riddance. I mean the kind where you continue to be on the other person's team, wanting and hoping the best for them. The kind where an ending of a chapter doesn't mean that you're now against each other. Normally, I write about my personal experience on this blog, but I'm feeling so inspired by one of my clients right now that I can't not write about it. After meeting every week for 14 plus months in a row, I've seen this person move through romantic despair and hopelessness, wondering if true love is really even possible within such a traumatized world. I've seen her end a relationship of 8 years after cultivating a deeper. Oh, I'm using the wrong pronouns.
That's all right.
Okay.
They would have been my pronouns back then.
Yeah, I will update these. Note to self. Okay. I've seen them end a relationship of 8 years after cultivating a deeper attunement to their body and simply following their body's feedback. It didn't feel good to be with that guy, so why were they letting their energy leak like that? And now, after having regained hope and then falling deeply and passionately in love with a woman, she found herself in awe of what is possible in love. They found themselves in awe of what is possible in love and relationships. And today, after multiple sessions of expressing fear around leaving the honeymoon phase, what if the relationship won't last forever? They proudly announced to me that they have ended things with the very person who reignited a spark inside of them that had felt dormant for so long. In fact, they were celebrating. To break up with someone doesn't mean you stop loving them. Doesn't mean you turn from allies to enemies. It simply means the relationship is going through a transition. Within a capitalist, heteronormative society, we often feel shame around breakups or even self-doubt. Does this mean I'm a failure at love? The relationship escalator turns love into a linear, outcome-oriented mission. But my client has effectively divested from the relationship escalator after weeks and weeks of ongoing commitment to shadow work, to unlearning internalized systems of oppression, and to prioritizing secure attachment with themselves first and foremost. So we're like halfway through it. The rest I just kind of want to summarize instead of reading word for word. And it's really just like why there's so much to celebrate in there. There's so much abundance in breaking up with someone who is misaligned. Do you want to speak more to this?
I feel like I needed all of that as a reminder so much. I'm in that, like, just getting from the grieving, the self-judgment. Yeah, I need to remember everything that you just said. Yeah, it's so alive for me right now. And yeah, I think the abundance that I truly love now is like being in my room, not in misaligned romantic relationships, and just this life being so full of possibilities and full of peace, peace in my belly, peace in my body, rest, ease. Yeah. And that's really true abundance. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like you summarized it so beautifully.
Yeah. So I wrote down 7 bullet points about things to celebrate. it's kind of a lot. Like we don't have to zoom in that much. But since you brought up the body sensations, I feel drawn towards that. Because I know for you, that's been a huge part of just developing secure attachment with yourself. I mean, that's ultimately what led to breaking up with this person you were together with for 8 years. You just started listening to your body and you were like, oh my God, my body is actually telling me I don't like to be around this person.
Yeah. And even my last connection, if I'm honest, like it was some very strong physical sensations that I had in myself. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very powerful practice, just slowing down and cultivating that relationship with the body. Because, of course, the empire does not want us to do that. It's not in the empire's best interest because we're conditioned to override ourselves in order to produce. So it's such a revolutionary practice just to slow down and tune in. It's kind of like coming home to yourself. It's like, oh, what do you have to say to me? I'm listening, and then you like, maybe it guides you in a direction where you're like, I didn't know I was going to break up with this person. I thought we were going to be together forever. But that's the abundance of it. You're not holding on to things that are misaligned. And maybe it's the holding on to things that are misaligned that creates that sense of hopelessness too. It's like, oh, why does this feel so frustrating to be with this person? Or why aren't I feeling fulfilled the way I want to? But then as long as your time and your energy is going towards the misalignments, then you might be missing out on more things that are aligned.
Completely. Yeah, completely. And you'll love to know, that's what I love about the work that we do. It just filters out. I was with my mum and my eldest daughter yesterday, and as you know, mum has early Alzheimer's and was a social worker herself for years, and was sharing with my daughter and I that she has this friend doing this favor for her, but actually she doesn't enjoy the activity, and was like expressing real difficulty in knowing what to do and how to communicate that, and which sort of shocks me because I'm like, Mum, you like being, supporting people to have a voice your whole life, and that's how you've parented me and my girls, and and she said, but it's different with yourself, and I'm like, and but in the end, like, my wisdom was, see how you feel in your body when you get the phone call to do the activity and when you're there, and just, you can't help but then, I think, in my experience, have the courage to say what needs to be said, and do whatever you need to do to move out of that. Yeah. So much more powerful than, getting in your head. That's obviously not been working. There
Right.
you go.
I do also just want to normalize for people who are listening that, like, it's such a profound act of courage to actually listen to your body. Not only hear your body, but like listen. It's like, okay, I hear you and I'm going to take the appropriate action. And at least for me, that does not happen overnight. It's usually a process where I'm listening and then I'm grieving. I'm like, but I don't want to break up with this person, but I don't want to move. I don't want to XYZ, whatever the thing is that feels misaligned. And there's like a small process of maybe like a little bit of resistance, maybe some grief, maybe some fear. I mean, definitely some fear, because you can't have courage without fear. Courage is just saying yes to the fear and not being stopped by it.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
So it's definitely a practice, and it's not this overnight, like, oh, I listened to my body and now my life is radically different.
Yeah. There's a period of, I wish I could be in denial and forget that I noticed that in my body. Yeah. Right. And I think for me, another piece that's made that easier is maybe realizing it may never be like a 100%, feeling positive. Do you know what I mean? It's like there is probably, because, we've chosen connections or in situations because we have mindfully chosen them and they've been good experiences. Like, of course, there's things that we want to continue on. And so it may never be a 100% yes, now I need to go in this direction. And that's okay, I suppose.
So I feel like this overlaps with this format of solo polyamory or relationship anarchy. I feel like there's a lot of overlap between the two, but they are different. It might be worth just distinguishing how they're different before we go into things. I could speak to this. Did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, I love because I've been inspired by your embodiment of them. Yeah, so yeah, I'd love to hear you
Oh,
describe.
that's sweet. Okay. We inspire each other, you and I. It's a very sparkly relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mirror vortex.
Yeah. So I'll say this too. Probably if you ask somebody else, they'll probably give you a different answer too. So, I don't claim to be like the expert on this. This is just my lived experience, my perspective. But I understand relationship anarchy as just non hierarchical ways of relating, particularly decentering the couple. Because at least with imperialism, we're conditioned to really center the couple. We're encouraged to kind of merge our sense of self with another person. And so the way that kind of trickles over into the non monogamous world is there's usually a hierarchy where the couple has like veto power, or they hold more power over other relationships in the dynamic. Um, so in many ways, it could be a barrier to intimacy. It could be a barrier to authenticity. When I say intimacy, I mean physical, emotional, spiritual, just this sense of vulnerability. Because as long as there's a power dynamic, there's not going to be a lot of vulnerability, or maybe just one sided vulnerability. And then solo polyamory, I mean, there's so much overlap, but I would say the biggest difference for me, solo polyamory is about just kind of being at the center of your own life, not centering it around any particular person, and really just valuing autonomy. So it's not to say that like you're just completely avoidant or isolated or something like that. Like you can still very much be immersed in the community. You can have a thriving social life. It just means that you're not going to sacrifice like your desires or your needs in order to be with somebody else. I mean, that's the way I would describe it. Do you want to add anything?
Mm, mm, mm. How do I describe it? Yeah, I think it's for me, and I know that maybe there are people that have nesting partners, who could operate in this way that, you're talking about. But for me, it's like where possible, at least choosing romantic connections with people who struck the structure of their lives. They have that autonomy. So, um, yeah, for me, ideally for my partners, it's not having nesting partners, not having those, really big pre-commitments that really limit, what a connection can be. And just like I sort of think of it as like pure freedom, because I love that about this life, that you just really do never know where it's going to go. That's one thing I've learned with this. Oh my god. Yeah, and and that includes, I think, as well, for me, a big alignment that I've learned through my work with you to be alive to is that other folk, certainly that I'm in romantic connections with, but even friendships, I need this alignment, that they are on a similar growth journey to me, that, they're driven by that to know themselves more and
Mm,
develop authentic, harmonious relationships. And
mm,
that includes having done the work, continuing to do the work, and having the time and energy available to nurture relationships. And I feel like that can be challenging, in polyamorous communities. I think the abundance that's possible out there is exciting, but I'm not
mm.
sure how much people really know themselves to know what they have to offer. So yeah, that's one thing I'm trying to be aware of in myself. That's for
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah, it brings me back to this idea of control or ownership,
Mm,
particularly in this couple dynamics. It's not that like you're not allowed to love people or have a couple or something. It's just
mm,
usually within those dynamics, there's like permission that gets asked, or
mm,
I think you've experienced this. I've experienced this too, where I'm like trying to hang out with somebody and we can't make plans without the other person giving a green light or a red light. And it just feels like
yeah.
almost like parental, like paternal, you know, it's just like a little annoying. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
I just want to
yeah,
be a person with you.
yeah. Or I'd rather it was like, because ultimately I think it's that individual managing their time, making decisions, you know. So if it's around sexual health preferences or time, like I pay attention to that language. Like, is it that person saying it's my preference to do this? You know, I'll check my calendar and let you know if I'm available. You know, as opposed to, oh, we have that agreement, or I just need to check with blah. Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a way for people to own it. Mm.
Well, in this, I'll call it a round of breakups. I mean, understanding that breakups are also cyclical. So in this cycle that you're in, I mean, I've definitely felt and seen the ways that you're different this time around, even the ways that you went into the relationships, the way that you're coming out of the relationships, in these themes of hope and hopelessness. What feels what feels different to you about how this round went? Like, one specific thing I'm thinking of is, what were the indicators to you that you're like, ooh, actually, I'm really turned off. Like, this isn't gonna
Mm,
work for me.
mm, mm, mm. Honestly, it was my body. Like, I think in both circumstances, like, just a real, in one, there was just a really strong knowing of an awareness that the other person had come to about what they wanted, just not being in alignment, you know, with an easeful, what I talked about before, you know, open, free continuation of our connection. And so that was just really instantaneous of just like, no, you know, and at the same time, a real beautiful gratitude to them for communicating honestly as soon as they were aware of that. And yeah, and like a celebration that that's what they want. They didn't owe me anything otherwise, you know,
Mm.
and yeah, and at the same time as, you know, a grief of the beautiful connection that we had and what we could have had. But yeah, that was a really amazing healing experience, I think. And
Mm.
yeah, and then the other, I think that was just this real awareness of us both having, you know, really tried to align what we were both wanting and um, what was available, to give each other, and uh, yeah, just again, it was just a real kind of, I reached that point of, oh, this just can't be what I need, you know, like it was just, yeah, and again, like just that acceptance, and yeah, but still there being grief there, you know, of what I imagined might have been possible. But, you know, it's that thing of grieving over like possibility, you know, rather than actually what was. So, yeah,
Mm.
keeping that in mind as well. Yeah.
Ah, that's one of the things I had noted. The 7 bullet points of celebrations. It's like not clinging to a fantasy,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
even just like if you can acknowledge the fantasy and
Mm.
distinguish what is the fantasy versus reality. Not that I know about that. Like, I've definitely suffered through a lot of fantasies that I was unwilling to let go of.
Yeah, and ultimately it being like respectful to say, okay, I hear, you know, I see what is alive in the other person. Like,
Yeah.
it's almost like not respectful to be wanting more, and
Yeah.
being cranky that I'm not getting more. Like, that's crazy. Again, like, that person doesn't owe me time. You
Yeah.
know, yeah,
Ooh.
it's down to me. Like, what am I, you know, enabling? What am I accepting? Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
In my school right now, for folks who don't know, I'm in psychic school. And one of the lessons that I've learned recently is around love. And we looked at the energy of love, like on a quantum physics level. And the way that I learned love really is, it's just like accepting somebody for who they are and where they are,
Mm.
not needing your love to change that person, not needing that person to change in general, but just being with them where they're at. And that is a skill and a practice that culturally we don't really learn.
Mm.
And when I hear you give this example, to me, it just sounds like actually like really deep, profound love, you know? And I think a common misconception in the empire, cultures of empire, is that if we love somebody, then we have to like sacrifice ourselves, or they need to sacrifice themselves. We need to make it work at all costs. There's this idea that sacrifice is like really romantic,
Mm.
or like martyrdom or something like that. But from a relationship anarchy lens,
Mm.
maybe love is just not forcing things, you know? Maybe it's just a
Mm.
practice of
Mm.
acceptance.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. That definitely resonates. And
Mm.
yeah, and that thing of because I think almost in a way, like one of my skills, shortcomings, I don't know, is that ability to, you know, have that goal of accepting where people are at, you know, like trying to adjust my expectations and put aside my needs for where they're at, you know, from that, you know,
Mm.
loving and accepting someone. Yeah, but that's the piece that I'm trying to refine before now I think I enter into a romantic relationship is looking really objectively at
Mm.
how our lives may or may not align and not
Mm.
pursuing something, you know, because I can look back now and yeah, I realize that objectively was always going to be tricky. But I guess then that abundant mindset, we're like, well, you know, maybe it could work and maybe we could enjoy the time together. And yeah, but I think for me, what I've learned is there is like a minimum amount of time that I think is necessary to be able to spend with someone, to enjoy time together, but also to be able to, you know, discuss things that come up in relationships, you know, process,
Yeah.
heal, and yeah.
If you don't mind, were you going to say something else?
No.
I want to offer my reflections around like the more recent transition you're going through. Does that feel okay?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I will say, I think I feel a little bit of discomfort because, you know, I guess I imagine maybe either of those people, all of those people that we've talked about, you know, may end up hearing this, and I don't want it to sound like I think I've been perfect in this. You know, there's definitely things that I wish that I had had the patience or stamina, resilience, kindness, you know, to do better around communication and yeah, and ultimately my decisions have been, you know, back to what you said around yeah, what was I guess my limits around those things like stamina, patience. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think yeah, ultimately I do have love and respect at the heart of all those connections. It's yeah, I just we all do the best
Yeah.
that we can at the time. Yeah.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a good example of how society could look as a whole. Like, what if we all experienced relationship transitions with such love and compassion? Just what a peaceful world we would live in. And misalignments don't mean that somebody's bad or wrong or somebody's right or good. It's just
Mhm.
like, okay, a misalignment is a misalignment. It's neutral.
Yeah.
If there's a scheduling conflict, we're not like demonizing the other person. You know,
Yeah.
it's just a misalignment in schedules.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
um, Well, bringing it back to the ways I've seen you grow and transform over time, particularly your relationship with yourself, it's really stood out to me how that's kind of like rippled out into your relationships with others. So if you do recall, I know you recall, that used to be actually like terrified of spending time alone.
Do you remember what I said when you said, have you thought about going on a holiday on your own? Do you remember what my response was? That would be like
I remember like
drama.
Yeah, I remember the energy behind it, which was like what? Like, you can't make me.
You're not my real dad.
Oh gosh.
Only my therapy daddy.
Your shadow work daddy.
Yes. Oh my god. Call the podcast that. Mm-hmm.
Shadow daddy.
So
yeah,
big.
it definitely would appeal to a different audience.
Or the same audience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Venn diagram.
Right. Well, I mean, it's just been amazing to me to see the way that your relationship to alone time has shifted, where like you were kind of repulsed by it before. I get the image of like a cat not wanting to go into a bathtub. They're just like, their toes are all spread out and their claws are out and they're like hanging on for dear life. And they're like, don't put me in there. And then I remember the shift happening gradually where there was like a softening. And then eventually with time, it came to that point of like, oh, I cannot wait for this time by myself. And I was like, who are you? It's good to meet you. Like, who is this version of yourself? Because I don't know them.
Yeah.
It's been really cool to witness. How has that felt for you to experience?
Hilarious. Yeah, really. Again, it's one of those like key pieces of, like the jewels of this work, that then continue to support the work. It's like, honestly, now I would so much rather be in my room, having peaceful time on my own than, being in an uncomfortable or misaligned relationship, and I think as well, and I think the pandemic, us having done this work and the pandemic at the same time really helped me unpack this. Like I was forced to, really through both the things, be okay with it, and then discovering the gifts in it, realizing how much I needed rest and how much, I do get overstimulated by the world and then need to decompress. And and even now, get ready, like next level of who even am I? Because there are a lot of things I'm, manifesting at the moment, developing my sex work. I want to start studying soon, two-way touch, like interactive erotic education, a sexological bodywork course. I want to start spending more time in Melbourne, and then I've like got my life admin, which I struggle to keep on top of at the best of times. And I was like, I don't think I have time for a relationship right now. I've got all that shit I need to do. And I was like, I beg your pardon. So there we go, mic drop. I know, right?
A moment of re-meeting yourself. You're like, oh, there's somebody new here.
Weird. So weird. Yeah.
Sounds like you're clear on your priorities. Sounds like you have things that motivate you outside of just romance.
Sounds like solid polyamory relationship etiquette. You can have the manifesto beside the toilet, and eventually you do, embody it. Yeah. Eventually.
Well, it's really stood out to me through this kind of transformation that you've gradually been stepping into. And now you're like this completely different person a few years later. The ways, maybe the ways that you're turned off by people who are just in a different place than where you are now. Like maybe a previous version of yourself would have gladly been turned on, you know? But as you seem to deepen into your quality time with yourself, that's what I would call it. It seems like that maybe there's a turn off around feeling somebody's presence, but not the quality of their presence.
Yeah. And just knowing the cost, you know, and I feel like at the moment the universe is testing me in this way. You know, I keep bumping into, you know, connections, old connections as you describe, and past me would have gone, oh my God, it's fate, you know, and yeah, and I can go, oh my God, I'm horny as fuck and they're so beautiful, and oh my God, you know, and I know, you know, where that's going to go. You know, lucky I have a toy collection. Yeah, I think I'm just more aware of the cost. And again, it's really similar to my relationship with alcohol, you know, or my relationship to endurance of misaligned connections. It's like just because you can do those things doesn't mean you should. And ultimately, is it going to support where I want to go? Yeah. And I think the other thing that more and more is alive for me is my girls are so much older now, and oh my God, you know, they're like, they see my every move, you know, and I want to be modeling to them, and they model it to me. Oh my God, yeah, like it's quite intense at the moment, yeah, in a good way, in a good way, in a good way. I call my eldest my life coach from my loins. I just don't understand why you're not just following your dreams. Have you made an appointment with your accountant yet? Are we going to Melbourne next weekend? I'm like, what have I created? Oh my God. Yeah.
Love that. Well, we're coming up towards the hour mark, so we'll start wrapping up shortly. You and I could talk for hours, as we both know, and
as we do.
We could definitely deepen on this topic too. Right. I wonder if there's anything you haven't said, just that you wanted to circle back to, or, well, let me not overload you.
Yeah. No, I was just looking at what you flagged that we would talk about. Is there anything else? Oh yeah, I would. Yeah, I've definitely, you know, started this work to, I think, reduce my distress in my relationships, you know, and in how I was navigating polyamory. What it's become, I think, is, you know, how I can most impact in the world, you know, and I am also really passionate in, I recognise that this intense way of working, you know, I can do because I am privileged enough, you know, to have the resources to invest in it. And I'm so passionate about how, what I describe to others when I describe our therapeutic relationship, you know, I describe it as like peer coaching, you know, and that it's not that hierarchical, you know, clinician patient model. I really appreciate you sharing your life and your experiences of challenges or things that I'm experiencing, and you know, we are trying to create a similar life, and so it is that inherent validation of, it might be different to a lot of the world, but it is valid and it is possible, you know, and so often we're spookily having, you know, similar themes going on in our lives, and it's been incredible. Yeah, and I'm really passionate about, well, how can that proliferate, you know, in an accessible way within community, within individuals. Yeah, that's why I love sharing this. And I feel a responsibility to do that. You know, I am in roles where I can help make that happen, and I hope that I am.
Mm-hmm.
Does that resonate?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are you kidding?
Just checking. Just checking we're still
100%.
aligned.
110. Yeah. You know it.
How does that feel in your body?
That's a good question. I feel it in my tummy, like little tingles. Yeah, Adrienne Marie Brown says what we practice at the small scale sets the pattern for the whole system. So I definitely resonate with what you're saying about how do we make this more accessible and how do we scale it. And I know that these private interactions you and I have are just seeds that will ripple out. And I really appreciate you bringing up this idea of like non-hierarchical therapeutic relationship. That in itself could literally be an entire episode, and I actually would love to circle back to that. It's a deep topic. I wrote an article about it. It's called Professionalism, the Death of Spirit. But the summary is like, if people are seeking healing modalities, the hierarchy is going to get in the way of the healing, you know? So it's like more of a performance than like actual healing happening, or maybe it's just surface level and you can't go as deep as you need to. I'll just leave it there for now. There's a lot to
say. Yeah. It resonates for me in the sex work that I want to do. And the hierarchy. Whole other.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So multiple episodes, bookmarking.
Anyone thinks we should have our own podcast, please drop a comment.
Literally. Yeah.
Comedy, kink, and the revolution.
Oh, wow. We're coming up with so many names in this one episode. Yeah. We've got some ideas to like put on the wall and brainstorm.
I love it.
I do want to add one little thread in before we close out, and it's tying it back to this theme of like hopefulness and hopelessness. And I want to leave people listening with something tangible that they can practice themselves. I think we've done a good job at talking about like what are some of the practices. I just want to offer one practice. So it's the practice of just looking for evidence, because there's always scarcity, there's always abundance coexisting alongside each other. So it's a matter of like, what are you searching for the evidence of? Like, I mean, you can resonate with this in your experience, right? Like when you're in that down place and you're like, oh, I don't know if there's any possibilities out there, XYZ, my heart is broken, the dating pool is small, whatever the thing is. You know, like maybe those things are true. And it's like, what do you want to do while you're in that spot? Because you could definitely dig the hole deeper by continuing to search for the evidence of why not.
Mm.
And also there's just the reminder of like, oh yeah, what is also evident is that this is a cycle that will ebb and flow, and this feeling is not going to last forever. And even just holding on to that little nugget, it could be like a life raft of sorts when you're just going through those dips.
I can see my new tattoo.
Love it, but you hate it.
A little hibernating bear and then a life raft and just a circle. Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. Can I show? Because I was joking, but I think I will show it. So this is tell me if you can see it properly. Yeah, that's what really. Is that mirrored? Can you read it?
Can you read it? It's a little fuzzy.
So it's hope. Notice, this is what I got from our work. Hope. Notice the moments of abundance, pleasure, growth, and doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's that practice of abundance. Yeah, noticing abundance, noticing those moments. Yeah. Abundance, pleasure, growth, and doing the right thing.
That's a really great way to wrap up the episode. I do have one more question. I bet people would be curious to know how that feels in the body, that practice, to notice when those things are happening.
I think a relief, is the biggest thing for me, and that, smooth belly. Yeah, like what's the word? A calm tummy and like bubbly excitement of, oh yeah, in the face of everything that you just talked about, there is this good stuff that is happening that I'm making happen. Yeah, and that's what brings about hope.
Was that a bubbly excitement in your chest?
Yeah.
Like moving upwards?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, the body is such an effective communicator. It's cool how excitement can literally manifest as like an upward energy. Or like even just the bubbles. That feels like a really cathartic way to experience excitement.
Like effervescence. Yeah.
Yeah, rising to the surface. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. I know that we're going to have more conversations, so this will be goodbye for now, and I'll see you tomorrow for our sessions. Wait, in 2 days.
2 days.
For our session. Yeah. So we'll be seeing more of each other, but we'll say goodbye for now on the podcast. And just thanks for being open to sharing about your personal experiences. I think that takes a lot of courage, and there's definitely a gift in there for everybody. So thanks for being willing.
Thank you for being the catalyst, continuing to be the catalyst for me on this journey. Who knows where it will go.
Thank you for being a catalyst, says the catalyst. So much mirroring.
So meta. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in, friends. That's all for today. If you want to stay in touch with Melissa, you can follow them on Instagram at vixen_riot. I have that linked in the episode description. I also have linked to the organizations that they referenced today if you want to check those out. And I'm also linking the blog posts that I read a part of, and that's on my website, abundantfutures.net, where you can also book a session with me if you're looking for spiritual guidance. And if you have any other feedback about the episode and you want to share, you can send an email to abundantfutures888@gmail.com. Peace be with you.